When a proud Comanche laughs at a city girl's torn dress in a rough Western saloon, he has no idea that what's about to happen will challenge everything he believes about strength, courage, and honor. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching sun beat down on the dusty streets of Redemption Creek, a small frontier town in the Texas Territory, 1875. Sarah Bennett stepped off the stagecoach, her emerald eyes squinting against the blinding light. Clutching her leather-bound journal to her chest, she surveyed the ramshackle buildings that lined the main street. After 5 days of brutal travel from Boston, her once pristine blue dress was wrinkled, and her blonde hair had escaped its pins. "Miss Bennett." A portly man hurried toward her, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I'm Mayor Wilkins. Welcome to Redemption Creek." Sarah smiled politely, though exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. "Thank you for meeting me, Mayor. I'm eager to begin my work." The mayor glanced nervously at her journal. "Yes, well, about your articles. Some folks here aren't keen on outsiders telling their stories, especially those from back east." "I understand their hesitation," Sarah replied, straightening her posture. "But the readers of the Boston Chronicle deserve to know the true nature of frontier life, not just the romanticized versions in dime novels." Mayor Wilkins sighed. "Just tread carefully, Miss Bennett. The saloon's the only place with rooms to let. I'll take you there, though it's hardly appropriate for a lady such as yourself." As they walked, curious eyes followed them. Sarah noted every detail: the general store with its barrels of supplies, the blacksmith hammering at his forge, women hanging laundry while keeping watchful eyes on playing children. This wasn't the lawless wasteland many Easterners imagined, but a community struggling to build something lasting in harsh conditions. "The Silver Dollar," announced the mayor, gesturing to a 2-story building. A weathered sign swung above the batwing doors. The painted silver dollar nearly faded away. Inside, the saloon fell silent as Sarah entered. The piano player's fingers froze mid-note, and conversations died. Sarah felt her cheeks flush but kept her chin high. "Mrs. Cooper," called the mayor. "This is Miss Bennett from Boston. She needs a room." A woman with copper-colored hair tied in a practical bun emerged from behind the bar. Her face, though lined with age and hardship, retained traces of beauty. "A journalist, eh? Well, you'll find plenty to write about here. Come on, I'll show you your room." As Sarah followed Mrs. Cooper upstairs, she felt eyes on her back. One gaze burned more intensely than the others. Turning slightly, she locked eyes with a tall man seated alone at a corner table. Unlike the other patrons, his skin was bronze, his long black hair tied back with a leather cord. He wore buckskins and a cotton shirt, blending both native and white clothing styles. His face remained impassive as he studied her, but something in his dark eyes made her heart quicken. "That's Swift River," Mrs. Cooper said quietly, noticing Sarah's attention. "Half Comanche, half white. Works as a scout for the cavalry sometimes, trades with his mother's people other times. Walks between two worlds and belongs to neither." "Is he dangerous?" Sarah asked, unable to look away from the man's penetrating gaze. Mrs. Cooper chuckled. "Everyone in this town is dangerous in their own way, honey. But Swift River? He's saved more lives than he's taken, which is more than I can say for some who call themselves civilized." Later that evening, after unpacking her meager belongings, Sarah ventured back downstairs. The saloon had grown crowded and boisterous. Men played cards, others drank whiskey, and a few danced with women in colorful dresses. Sarah approached the bar where Mrs. Cooper was pouring drinks. "May I interview you for my article? I'd like to understand how a woman comes to run a saloon in a frontier town." Mrs. Cooper laughed heartily. "You city folks think you're so subtle. Fine, but not tonight. I've got a business to run." As Sarah turned to leave, she bumped into a bearded man reeking of whiskey. "Well, look what we got here, boys," he slurred. "A real lady journalist." Sarah attempted to step around him, but he blocked her path. "I've got stories that would curl that pretty hair of yours, miss. Why don't you interview me upstairs?" His companions laughed crudely. "No, thank you," Sarah replied firmly, trying to mask her fear. "Excuse me." The man grabbed her arm. "Don't be unfriendly now. Release her." The deep voice cut through the noise. Swift River stood behind them, his presence commanding attention despite his quiet tone. Mind your own business, Injun, spat the drunk. Swift River didn't move, but something in his stance made the man's companions back away. The lady said no. The drunk released Sarah's arm to confront Swift River, but in his inebriated state, he stumbled. Grabbing for balance, he caught Sarah's sleeve, tearing it from shoulder to elbow. Swift River moved with startling speed, positioning himself between Sarah and her harasser. The drunk took a wild swing, which Swift River easily dodged. One precise blow later, the troublemaker lay unconscious on the floor. A smile quirked Swift River's lips as he looked at Sarah's torn dress and flushed face. "City girls don't last long out here," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Sarah's embarrassment turned to indignation. "I appreciate your assistance, sir, but I assure you I'm perfectly capable of handling myself." Swift River's smile widened. "Is that so?" He looked around at the rough crowd. "Well, Miss Boston, I look forward to seeing that." Dawn broke over Redemption Creek with the promise of another scorching day. Sarah awoke to the unfamiliar sounds of a frontier town coming to life. Horses neighing, shopkeepers raising shutters, and the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Her torn dress hung over a chair, a stark reminder of last night's encounter. After dressing in her second-best outfit, a practical brown skirt and white blouse, Sarah descended to the saloon's main room. Mrs. Cooper was sweeping the floor, looking remarkably fresh despite the late night. "Morning, Miss Bennett," she called. "There's coffee on the stove if you want some." Sarah gratefully accepted a mug of the strong, bitter brew. "Thank you for your hospitality. I was wondering if you could direct me to someone who might repair my dress." Mrs. Cooper nodded. "Martha at the general store does fine needlework, but first, eat something. Can't have you fainting in this heat." As Sarah ate a simple breakfast of biscuits and bacon, the saloon's front door swung open. Swift River entered, ducking his head slightly under the doorframe. In the morning light, Sarah noticed details she'd missed the previous night. A small scar above his right eyebrow, the eagle feather tied into his hair, the way his movements combined fluid grace with coiled strength. "Morning, Swift," Mrs. Cooper called. "Hungry?" He nodded, his eyes briefly meeting Sarah's before he took a seat at a table. Mrs. Cooper placed a plate before him, then turned to Sarah. "Why don't you interview him for your article? Might give your Eastern readers a perspective they haven't considered." Sarah hesitated. The man had laughed at her predicament last night, finding amusement in her torn dress and discomfort. Yet something about him intrigued her. With notebook in hand, she approached his table. "Mr. River," she began, "I wonder if I might ask you some questions for my article." He looked up, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Swift River is one name, not a first and last like white men use." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I apologize for my ignorance. May I join you, Swift River?" He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "The city girl wants to learn. That's new." Determined not to be rattled, Sarah opened her notebook. "You're half Comanche, I understand. Would you tell me about your experience straddling two worlds?" Swift River studied her for a long moment. "Why do you care?" "Because most of what's written about frontier life comes from one perspective, usually white men from the East who've never set foot west of the Mississippi." Sarah replied candidly. "I want to write the truth, even if it's complicated." Something shifted in his expression. "Truth is always complicated. My father was a cavalry officer who fell in love with a Comanche woman after she was captured. Instead of sending her to a reservation, he married her. Neither his people nor hers forgave them." "And you?" Sarah asked softly. "I learned to hunt and track from my mother's people. Learned reading and mathematics from my father. When they both died of fever 10 winters ago, I discovered neither world fully accepted me." His voice remained matter-of-fact without self-pity. Sarah wrote quickly, captivated. "How did you come to Redemption Creek? The cavalry values my tracking skills, but doesn't trust me enough for a commission. This town needs someone who can communicate with both settlers and native tribes. I fill that space." He took a bite of food. "Now, city girl, why are you really here? Boston newspapers don't care about small Texas towns." Sarah closed her notebook. "My editor thought sending a woman to write about the frontier would sell papers. A novelty. But I have my own reasons." She hesitated, then continued. "My sister Lillian came west 5 years ago. She wrote regularly at first, then the letters stopped. Her last letter was postmarked from a town not far from here. Understanding dawned in Swift River's eyes. You're looking for her. Sarah nodded. The newspaper assignment gives me a reason to be here, to ask questions without raising suspicions. Suspicions? Her last letter mentioned a man named Jackson Crawford. She was concerned about his business dealings. Swift River's expression darkened. Crawford owns the largest cattle ranch in the territory, has the ear of the territorial governor, not someone to cross lightly. Do you know him? Sarah asked, leaning forward. Our paths have crossed. He wants Comanche land for grazing. Doesn't care how he gets it. Swift River pushed his empty plate away. If your sister questioned Crawford's methods, that might explain why her letters stopped. A chill ran through Sarah despite the growing heat of the day. Will you help me find her? Swift River's gaze was measuring. Why would I risk Crawford's anger to help a city girl I just met? Because you know what it's like to be caught between worlds, Sarah replied. Because you helped me last night when you didn't have to. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're bolder than you look, Miss Bennett. Sarah, she corrected. If we're to work together, you should use my given name. Swift River nodded slowly. I'll take you to Crawford's ranch tomorrow. We'll say you're writing about cattle operations for your newspaper. But tonight, meet me behind the livery stable at sunset. Why? He stood, towering over her. If you're going to survive out here, city girl, you need to learn some basics, starting with how to ride properly and how to shoot. Before Sarah could respond, the saloon doors burst open. A young boy rushed in, his face streaked with dust and tears. Swift, come quick. Riders attacked the Comanche camp by the creek. Swift River was moving before the boy finished speaking. At the door, he paused, glancing back at Sarah. Still think you can handle yourself out here? Without waiting for a response, he disappeared, leaving Sarah with her half-finished interview and a growing sense that her search for Lillian was about to become far more dangerous than she'd imagined. That evening, as the sun began its descent, Sarah made her way to the livery stable. She'd spent the afternoon interviewing townspeople, but thoughts of Swift River and his promised lessons kept intruding. She found him waiting with 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller dun mare. You're late, he observed, holding out the mare's reins. I was repairing my dress, Sarah replied, eyeing the horse nervously. I've only ridden in city parks, on gentle ponies with side saddles. Swift River's laugh was unexpected, deep and genuine. No side saddles here, mount up, city girl, daylight's wasting. The Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and crimson as Swift River led Sarah to a secluded clearing a mile from town. Her thighs already ached from the unfamiliar position of riding astride, but she refused to complain. The Comanche scout had been right about one thing. If she wanted to find Lillian, she needed to adapt to frontier life quickly. Dismount here, Swift River instructed, swinging down from his horse with fluid grace. Sarah attempted to copy his movement, but misjudged the distance. She would have fallen had Swift River not caught her arm, steadying her. His touch was firm yet gentle, and she found herself momentarily distracted by their proximity. Thank you, she murmured, stepping back. What happened at the Comanche camp today? A shadow crossed his face. Cattle rustlers used the chaos as cover to steal from Crawford's herd. They fired shots near the camp to make it look like the Comanche were responsible. That's horrible, Sarah said. Were there casualties? 2 warriors wounded, but they'll recover. I tracked the rustlers far enough to confirm they weren't Comanche. His jaw tightened. Crawford won't care. He'll use any excuse to push my mother's people further from their hunting grounds. Sarah processed this information. Could this be connected to what my sister discovered? Possibly. Lillian's letters. Did she mention specific concerns about Crawford? Sarah retrieved a folded paper from her pocket. Her last letter. She wrote that Crawford was expanding his empire through means that would shock civilized society. She was investigating land deeds at the county office when she found irregularities. Swift River read the letter carefully. Your sister was brave. Perhaps too brave. He handed it back. We should be cautious tomorrow at Crawford's ranch. Now your first lesson. From his saddlebag he produced a revolver, a Colt Peacemaker. Ever fired a gun, city girl? Sarah shook her head. Never had cause to in Boston. Out here it could save your life. He demonstrated the proper grip. Hold it firmly but don't tense your arm. That bottle on the fallen log, that's your target. Sarah took the gun, surprised by its weight. Following Swift River's instructions, she aimed and pulled the trigger. The recoil knocked her back a step, and the shot went wild. Again, Swift River said, moving behind her. Widen your stance, both eyes open. His hands adjusted her posture, his chest nearly touching her back. Sarah was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth radiating from him, the scent of leather and sage. Focusing with effort, she fired again. This time, the bottle shattered. Good, he said, stepping away. Now the rifle. For the next hour, Swift River patiently taught Sarah the basics of shooting and riding properly. As darkness fell, they practiced moving silently through underbrush. Why are you helping me? Sarah asked as they prepared to return to town. You barely know me. Swift River was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, I had a sister too. Yellowbird. She died during a government relocation. I couldn't save her. His voice remained steady, but Sarah heard the pain beneath his control. No one should lose a sister when it can be prevented. The simple honesty of his answer touched Sarah deeply. I'm sorry about Yellowbird. He nodded once, accepting her sympathy without comment. Tomorrow we ride at dawn. Crawford's ranch is 2 hours from town. Wear practical clothes. That fancy dress will only draw attention. I'll be ready, Sarah promised. True to her word, Sarah was waiting outside the livery stable as the first light of dawn broke the horizon. She'd traded her city clothes for a simple riding skirt and sturdy boots borrowed from Mrs. Cooper, who had become an unexpected ally. Swift River arrived leading the same 2 horses from yesterday. He assessed her outfit with approval. You learn fast, city girl. Sarah, she reminded him, mounting her horse with more confidence than the previous day. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sarah. The ride to Crawford's ranch took them through breathtaking landscape, rolling hills covered in wildflowers, stands of oak and pecan trees, and wide-open prairie. Swift River pointed out tracks and signs that would have been invisible to her untrained eye, deer paths, rabbit warrens, and once, the fresh prints of a mountain lion. Crawford's land begins here, he said eventually, indicating a barbed wire fence stretching as far as the eye could see. 2 years ago, this was open range where Comanche hunted buffalo. Now it's private property. They followed the fence line until a large ranch house came into view. Built of sturdy timber with a wide porch, it spoke of wealth and permanence. Cowboys moved about the property, tending to horses and cattle. Remember, Swift River cautioned as they approached, you're here to write about cattle ranching. Nothing more. A foreman met them in the yard, his weathered face suspicious. State your business. Sarah smiled pleasantly. Sarah Bennett, Boston Chronicle. I'm writing about successful cattle operations in the territory. Mr. Crawford's ranch was highly recommended. The foreman's eyes narrowed at Swift River. What's he doing here? Mr. River is my guide, Sarah replied smoothly. I'm unfamiliar with the territory. Wait here, the foreman grunted, disappearing into the house. Minutes later, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit emerged. Jackson Crawford had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, his smile practiced but not reaching his cold blue eyes. Miss Bennett, welcome to Rocking Sea Ranch. He extended his hand to Sarah, ignoring Swift River completely. I'm always happy to speak with the press about the future of the cattle industry. Sarah shook his hand, noting his firm grip. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Mr. Crawford. Please call me Jack. All my friends do. He gestured to the house. Come inside for refreshments. Your guide can wait with the horses. Sarah glanced at Swift River, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. That would be lovely, she replied. The ranch house's interior was opulently furnished with imported carpets and furniture that would not have looked out of place in a Boston mansion. Crawford led her to a study lined with books that appeared unread, their spines unbroken. Whiskey? He offered. Water, thank you. Sarah declined, opening her notebook. Your operation is impressive. How many acres do you currently own? Crawford smiled. 20,000, with plans to expand further west. That's considerable growth in just a few years, Sarah observed. I understand this was open range not long ago. Something flickered in Crawford's eyes. Progress requires change, Miss Bennett. The open range system was inefficient. Property rights and fences mean better breeding, better stock. And the native tribes who used this land before? Sarah kept her tone neutral, journalistic. Crawford's smile tightened. They're being civilized on reservations, as is government policy. It's better for everyone. The interview continued, with Sarah asking increasingly detailed questions about land acquisition and water rights. Crawford answered smoothly, but she noticed his growing impatience. You seem very interested in property matters for a cattle article, he observed, refilling his whiskey glass. Sarah maintained her composure. Thorough reporting requires understanding all aspects of the business. Crawford set down his glass. You know, you remind me of someone. Another woman who asked too many questions. Lillian, I believe her name was. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. Oh, another journalist? She claimed to be. Crawford moved closer. She, too, was interested in land deeds. Shortly after our conversation, she left town quite suddenly. How unfortunate, Sarah said, gathering her notes. I should be going. My guide will worry. Crawford blocked her path. Your guide is half savage, Miss Bennett. I wouldn't trust him with a lady's safety. His voice hardened. Why are you really here? Before Sarah could answer, a commotion erupted outside. Gunshots and shouting broke the afternoon quiet. Crawford cursed, moving to the window. Raiders at the north pasture. He grabbed a rifle from a wall mount. Stay here. The moment he left, Sarah began searching the study, opening drawers and examining papers on the desk. In a locked drawer, which she opened with a letter opener, she found a stack of land deeds, some with signatures that looked suspiciously different despite bearing the same name. Forgeries, she whispered, recognizing the technique from a forgery case she'd reported on in Boston. Find what you're looking for? Crawford's voice came from the doorway. He leveled his rifle at her chest. I know who you are, Sarah Bennett. Your sister was just as troublesome. Where's Lillian? Sarah demanded, fear and anger overriding caution. Crawford's smile was chilling. Gone. As you'll be, once I explain how you and that Comanche scout tried to rustle my cattle during the confusion. A floorboard creaked behind Crawford. Before he could turn, Swift River's arm locked around his throat. The rancher struggled, but Swift River's strength was superior. Within moments, Crawford slumped unconscious. We need to leave. Now, Swift River said, taking Crawford's rifle. His men saw me enter. They'll be here soon. Not without proof, Sarah insisted, grabbing the forged deeds. And not without learning what happened to Lillian. Swift River's expression softened slightly. In his desk, there's a letter addressed to the territorial governor. It mentions a woman being held at Miller's Creek mining camp until she agrees to sign away her claim. Sarah found the letter with shaking hands. Miller's Creek. Where is that? A day's ride north, Swift River replied, listening intently to approaching footsteps. We'll never make it out the front. He led her to a window at the rear of the study. Can you ride hard? Sarah nodded, clutching the documents. For Lillian? Absolutely. Swift River's smile was unexpected, transforming his serious face. You've earned a new name, city girl. Swift Heart would suit you better. Before Sarah could respond, he had the window open. Together, they slipped out just as Crawford's men burst into the study. Hoofbeats pounded across the Texas prairie as Sarah and Swift River pushed their mounts to the limit. Behind them, Crawford's men gave chase, the distance between them gradually widening as Swift River led them through terrain. The ranch hands hesitated to follow. A steep ravine, a treacherous creek crossing, and finally, into a dense thicket of trees and underbrush, where the horses could barely pass. They won't follow us here, Swift River said, his breath coming fast. This is Comanche land. Crawford's men are superstitious about it. Sarah leaned forward in her saddle, her muscles screaming from the hard ride. We have to reach Miller's Creek. If Lillian is there. Swift River nodded, his expression grave. We will, but not directly. Crawford will have men watching the main trails. He glanced at the setting sun. We'll rest here tonight and continue at first light. As darkness fell, Swift River built a small, nearly smokeless fire in a sheltered hollow. Sarah spread out the documents they'd taken from Crawford's study. These deeds, they're all forgeries, she said, examining them by firelight. He's been forcing people to sign away their land claims or forging their signatures when they refuse. Swift River studied the papers. This explains much. 3 homesteaders were found dead last winter, officially ruled accidents. All had refused to sell to Crawford. And this letter to the governor mentions dealing with the Indian problem once and for all. Sarah added, her voice tight with anger. He's planning something against your mother's people. Swift River's face remained impassive, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle changes in his eyes. Rage burned there, controlled but intense. We must reach Miller's Creek, find your sister, and then get these documents to Fort Richardson, he said finally. The commander there, Colonel Harrington, is a fair man. He would act on this evidence. Sarah moved closer to the fire, shivering despite the warm night. Why risk so much for me? For my sister? Swift River was quiet for a long moment, poking at the embers with a stick. When I first saw you in that saloon with your torn dress, I laughed. Another Eastern tenderfoot who wouldn't last a week. His voice softened. I was wrong. You have courage, Sarah Bennett. More than most men I've known. The use of her given name, spoken with such quiet respect, warmed her more than the fire. You've shown me kindness when you had no reason to, taught me to survive in this land. My father used to say that people are not defined by their blood or where they were born, but by the choices they make when tested. He met her gaze across the flames. You could have returned to Boston when you discovered the danger. Instead, you chose to fight for your sister. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. As you fight for your mother's people, even when neither world fully accepts you. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different worlds. Swift River reached across the fire, his calloused fingers gently touching her hand. Rest now, he said, his deep voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Tomorrow will test us both. Dawn found them already riding north, following game trails and dry creek beds to avoid the main roads. By midday, they crested a ridge overlooking a valley where a mining operation scarred the landscape. Crude wooden buildings clustered around a mine entrance with armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Miller's Creek, Swift River confirmed, passing Sarah his spyglass. The largest building is likely where they keep prisoners. Sarah scanned the camp, her heart pounding. How do we get in? There must be 20 men down there. Swift River's expression was thoughtful. Not all at once. Most will enter the mine during the day shift. We wait until then, create a distraction at the mine entrance, then search for Lillian. The plan was dangerous but simple. They waited until mid-afternoon when the majority of the men disappeared into the mine. Swift River positioned himself near the entrance while Sarah circled to approach the main building from behind. The distraction came in the form of a small explosion. Swift River had packed black powder into a crevice near the mine entrance. The resulting blast wasn't large enough to cause a cave-in, but created sufficient panic to draw the remaining guards away from the buildings. Sarah slipped through the back door of the main structure, finding herself in a dimly lit hallway with several doors. Most were unlocked and empty, but the last door was secured with a heavy padlock. Lillian, she called softly, pressing her ear to the wood. A weak voice responded from within. Who's there? It's Sarah. I've come to take you home. A sob of disbelief came from the other side. Sarah, is it really you? With trembling hands, Sarah examined the lock. Swift River had shown her how to pick simple locks during their lessons, but this one was beyond her skills. Looking around desperately, she spotted an axe mounted on the wall for emergencies. The noise would attract attention, but she had no choice. 3 solid strikes later, the door swung open to reveal a small, windowless room. Lillian sat on a narrow cot, her once vibrant face now pale and thin, her blonde hair dull, but her eyes, so like Sarah's own, lit with fierce joy at the sight of her sister. You came, Lillian whispered as they embraced. I never thought anyone would find me. Can you walk? Sarah asked, noting her sister's weakened state. Lillian nodded determinedly. Just get me out of here. I have information that will destroy Crawford. We already have some, Sarah assured her, supporting Lillian as they moved toward the exit. Swift River is helping us. They had almost reached the door when a shot splintered the wooden frame inches from Sarah's head. Crawford stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage, revolver aimed at the sisters. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Bennett women, he snarled. I built everything I have with my own hands. No one is going to take it from me. especially not a pair of meddling females and a half-breed scout. Your empire is built on forged deeds and murder, Sarah replied, positioning herself in front of Lillian. It ends today. Crawford's finger tightened on the trigger. I'll start with you, then your sister. No one will question 2 more mysterious deaths in this territory. A blur of movement came from behind Crawford. Swift River brought the butt of his rifle down hard on the rancher's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor as Crawford howled in pain. Swift River followed with a powerful blow to the jaw, sending the man sprawling unconscious. We must hurry, Swift River said, quickly binding Crawford with a length of rope. His men heard the shots. He lifted Lillian easily, carrying her outside where their horses waited. Sarah followed, her heart pounding with both fear and elation. They were halfway across the compound when shouts erupted from the mine entrance. Ride for Fort Richardson, Swift River commanded, helping Lillian onto his horse before mounting behind her. Don't stop for anything! The next hours passed in a blur of pounding hooves and dust. Twice they heard pursuers and changed direction, using every trick Swift River knew to confuse their trail. As sunset painted the sky, the American flag flying above Fort Richardson came into view. Colonel Harrington listened gravely to their story, examining the documents they'd taken from Crawford's study. When Lillian provided her written testimony about being kidnapped and held prisoner, the colonel's weathered face hardened with resolve. I've had my suspicions about Crawford for some time, he admitted, but without evidence my hands were tied. This changes everything. He summoned his adjutant. Prepare a detachment. We ride for Miller's Creek at dawn. That night, as Lillian rested under the fort doctor's care, Sarah and Swift River stood on the ramparts, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. What will you do now? Swift River asked quietly. Return to Boston with your sister? Sarah turned to face him, suddenly aware that the thought of leaving brought an unexpected ache to her heart. In the short time she'd known him, this man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. I could, she admitted. The Chronicle would publish this story. It would advance my career considerably. Swift River nodded, his expression carefully neutral. You would be good at it. You see truth where others miss it. But the story isn't finished, Sarah continued. Crawford isn't the only one exploiting this territory. The people here, all the people including the Comanche, deserve to have their stories told truthfully. Hope flickered in Swift River's dark eyes. You would stay? Sarah stepped closer, her heart racing with a different kind of courage than she'd needed to face Crawford's men. If I had a reason to. Swift River's hand gently touched her cheek. When I first saw you in that saloon with your torn dress, I thought you were just another city girl who wouldn't last a week in this territory. His voice deepened with emotion. Now I can't imagine this land without you in it. Then I'll stay, Sarah whispered. Not just for the stories, but for the man who taught me to see beyond what I thought I knew. About this territory. About the Comanche. She smiled up at him. About myself. Under the vast Texas sky, with the fort quiet around them, Swift